الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. Today's lecture is the first application to last time's lecture, and if you missed last time's lecture, I have one slide that I'm going to review it with which is not obviously enough time to review it, but last lecture was about paradigm theory and modes of thinking. As I do the application part, like using previous information and try to build on it, you will notice some redundancy, which is I meant it that way because if you hear it here without hearing the previous one, it would seem a little bit more difficult to apply. The same goes with the other branches of material that is used in atheism. Evolution is one, astronomy is another, and there's some other aspects that are used that we can talk about. History, of course, and sexuality. Those are the four major ones, but there might be some minor ones as well. So last lecture was the template. Now we start with the applications, and this is a lecture about thinking. You are going to go through life, especially the youth, and you're going to be bombarded with ideas, bombarded with modes of thinking, and you're going to face people that tell you certain things. And as I try to describe this, of course, you can never describe every single type of person that you'll meet, but you can group them. That group, a particular person may fit 100% with the group that I'm describing, or 90%, or may have a little bit of this group, a little bit of that, but I'm doing stereotypical groups. Those groups, not necessarily exactly the way they are in real life. You might find one person who is, literally 80% atheist, 20% religious. They do exist, or any other combination for that matter. But remember, when I'm making stereotypical groups just for explanation purposes. So you're going to find those groups that they try to tell you that monkeys are this is obviously a figurative figure, not that they say we came from monkeys, but it's all a continuum. And you're gonna find so I called that team A. That is team A. A for atheist, not A for any favoritism. And you're gonna try see group B. Your typical B for believers, your typical believers who are in our case Muslim, but you will find a lot of similarities between the Muslim group of believers with general group of believers and how they approach this issue. And then that's group B, and then you have group C, who is on the sidelines, who is maybe confused. They don't want to lose their faith, but they're being bombarded with ideas, and they just sort of want a resolution to this. And if you belong to group C, this lecture is for you. This lecture is not for group A or for group B, although I'm going to definitely talk about their position and try to point out the weakness in each. So obviously, I'm not going to come into this to this lecture with the idea that I'm going to side with group B against group A. No, I'm definitely not going to side with group A against group B. I'm going to tell you their logic, their deduction, their statements, what they're basing their ideas upon, and I'm going to tell you the weaknesses in those, and then it's up to you to make a conclusion. But what I'm definitely going to introduce something that is not usually talked about, which is my position, which I believe is the Islamic position, and hopefully, if it sounds convincing, this position is going to resolve all problems. And you're gonna see as I present this that there is actually not a conflict to begin with, except in our own understanding. So there's going to be three parts to this. Parts about what I believe is the Islamic position, and how do you present that. Parts about group B, the believers in general, and Muslims in particular, and part C about atheists. And of course, there's one comment about atheism. I'm stereotyping atheists into one group, although they're not really into one group. In fact, as much as atheists like to be away from God and faith. Actually, statistics say about 70% of them are not. And they cannot really say with any confidence that there is no creator to this universe. They just say we don't want to subscribe to a particular religion. So, but the true atheists are actually a minority among atheism. But for the purpose of explanation, I'm bundling them into a stereotypical group. So this lecture is just over 100 slides. So I think for all practical reasons, unless you tell me otherwise, but for all practical reasons, I was going to suggest that we divide it into 3 parts. Part 2, identify this position, which I think is the Islamic position, and that's about a third. And then Team B, and all their statements, and Team A and all their statements and their positions. Unless, again, if you want the whole thing, I'll be happy to do it, but it'll probably take at least 2 hours. So. Slide number 2. So again, this is not for Team A, this is not for Team B, although I'm going to analyze their positions to the most necessary details. This is for Team C. Team C, sometimes you see them and they have doubts. And and you see that all the time. And my advice is, if you have doubts, relax. You're only a human being. You're being bombarded with ideas and concepts and whatnot. And it is only, it's actually understandable if that at some point starts affecting us. And this is very important, because if you don't try to fix this in a relatively systematic way, you won't actually get into a real solution. So this lecture is to revitalize and shield your faith. Think of it as an immunization against deranged modes of thought, or deranged styles of thought, deranged paradigms. And the purpose of this is, after you immunize your faith, you can engage science and life in general, and you realize your fullest potential that Allah has given you in seeking knowledge. So the true purpose of this is to save C from A. I hope that's obvious by now. But of course, I would like to, regardless of which position you have coming into this, I would like this to be beneficial and be interactive as much as possible. But we all come with our own biases. You come here and you have your own frame of mind. And let me just tell you a little bit about something that I call intellectual indigestion, to try to avoid it so you can have the fullest benefit of this. Intellectual indigestion is when you come up with, you receive an idea that doesn't necessarily fit with you predetermined positions or predetermined conceived notions. And then whatever fits, you accept. Whatever doesn't fit, you try to reject. And we all come in with and there are multiple cognitive biases about this. There's confirmation bias, there is the ostrich bias, there is the selection bias. There's a lot of biases that play out. So in order to try to benefit as much as possible, I would like you to suspend judgment at least during till this lecture is done, and then you can take all that and you think about it. Again, this is a lecture about thinking. It's I'm not gonna give you, A plus B equals C, and this is, you go memorize it and go the rest of your life with it. This is not about this. And I will make along this way stops. Think of it as a train of knowledge, and I'm going to make stops that I think are necessary. But if you think there's another stop that we should stop and talk about it, by all means, let me know. Because those stops are what I decided based on my understanding of the situation, but every person, how they receive it, obviously they have different ideas. Next one. Again, this is the train. There's multiple stops. I'm going to pick a few of them. If you like different stops along the way, by all means, let me know. This is the palette. And this is just to illustrate the concept of intellectual indigestion. It's like if an idea comes in here or here or here, and it's not so close to the center where you think, where you receive best, then it doesn't get integrated, it gets rejected. If it goes in exactly as you want, it becomes very acceptable. But this is actually something that is not good, because you're subjecting yourself to the confirmation bias. Next. Okay, so open your heart, suspend judgment until the picture is complete. And again, before we venture into this, I'd like to remind myself, remind Team A, remind Team B, and they all need to be reminded, including Team B. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Don't talk about something you don't know. Don't make judgments about something you don't know. Those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, the sight, the vision and the hearing and the thinking, all of these things are you going to be asked about. So remember that if something you don't know, you should not venture into making conclusions about it. Okay, so what are the primary questions? The primary questions are the following. Question number one, if evolution is a fact, or even if it's a strong possibility or a strong theory, does that lead to atheism? Is there an actual connection between evolution, even if, I'm assuming if, it is a fact or a very strong possibility, is there a connection between evolution and atheism? Question number two, is the evidence for neo-Darwinian evolution unequivocal, which means is it strong, is it not debated, is it like absolute? And I'm making a very, very distinction here between neo-Darwinian evolution, which is evolution that you hear about on TV, in the high school, and all in colleges. No one talks, except very, very few, about other types of evolution besides neo-Darwinian evolution. I'm going to obviously say what neo-Darwinian evolution means. But is the evidence for neo-Darwinian evolution unequivocal? And question number three. So this question is for atheists. This question is mainly for atheists, and everybody can benefit this. And this question is mainly for believers. But the last question is, which I think is very important for believers also, what is our role in relation to creation? Okay, so so some people don't want to talk about evolution or don't want to address this issue or even entertain it. But what is our role? If you don't like evolution, what is your role toward creation? What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed just to be a bystander on the sidelines, have nothing to do with it? Maybe there is a role for learn and research. Maybe there is a role to finding mechanisms and processes from that learning and research. Maybe there's a role to understand the theme that I will display to you of gradualism that the Quran is talking about in relation to creation, and understanding what gradualism is and what we can learn from that. So it's not enough to, basically this is saying, it's not enough to say, you know what, I hate evolution, I don't want evolution, this is a work of the devil, whatever, but you have to obviously see what is your role toward the whole story of creation. Next. So that's primary. So I thought about, since this is a relatively sensitive and touchy topic for a lot of people on either way, I thought about, I would start with the conclusions, but the conclusions are a lot, so I will only use them as anchor points. And to alleviate any concerns, because no matter how much I talk about intellectual indigestion, people are still going to be people, and they're going to have issues one way or the other. So the conclusions are actually, there is a set of conclusions that are directed against the statements for a group A or the atheists, and there's just as many. I tried to make the numbers equal, just as many that are directed toward the group B or believers. You cannot side with this and completely, or with this completely, without realizing that every single side has some issues with their statements and some issues with their analysis and some issues with their conclusions. At least, again, the stereotypical groups. So the conclusion is not to side with one or the other. You could relax, but it is to sort of put them to the test. And then inshallah we can. So don't worry about this slide. If you can't read it, it's a lot. We will go through it one by one, and I'm gonna highlight. This is just anchor points. By the end of this, you would. So this is my slide about review. The one slide that we're gonna review the last lecture with. It's about the structure of knowledge, the organization of knowledge, and I made a relatively, I think, unsuccessful analogy between knowledge and language. If I tell you what a paradigm is, so the structure of knowledge is paradigm, and then epistemology or theory of knowledge, and then the actual content of knowledge. And if you think of paradigm as the letters or the words, epistemology is like the grammar, and then the actual body of knowledge is the paragraphs, the books, the libraries. So it's structured from this way. Now, one last concept before we dive into the Islamic position on creation is, and obviously this turned out to be a bad color, but People talk about the ijaz of the Quran. I think there is one aspect of the ijaz of the Quran that is not emphasized enough, but if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. But it's important to recognize for this topic in particular, and that is a message across time. If I told you I want you to write a book that has a lot of advice and wisdom, and I want you to write it for all mankind across all time, the very ancient and the modern and all the way in the future. And I want you to make that very useful to those people who are going to receive it. But at the same time, I don't want you to make make the content in a way that is going to benefit just one time and not benefit the other times, or make a problem for one era and not necessarily a problem for other era. Then you'll realize exactly what I mean by a message across time. So it should, and وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, for Allah is the highest example. The Quran, being a book of knowledge, maintains functionality through all phases of human development. This is very important. What that means is the Quran cannot say something that is going to be very serving for Muslims, 1,000 years ago, but going to be very problematic for us right now. And vice versa, cannot say something that is very problematic for us right now, but it's going to take us 1,000 years to resolve this. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be putting us in a difficult position. And this is what the practical application of this idea is. The practical application is that we do not bind, we do not restrict the Quranic interpretation to a particular prevailing paradigm. And I'm going to give you a very, very quick story that I wanted to reserve for the lecture about astronomy. But once upon a time, only 50 years ago, the prevailing paradigm was a steady state universe, infinite steady state, whatever. Big hotshot astronomers were very, very much believers. And just like you hear on the news about, or in lectures in universities about Big Bang Theory, it was exactly the same thing, but for steady state universe. Infinite in the past, no beginning, whatever. And then, and I'll leave the details about that till later, but then people try to interpret the Quran in harmony with the steady state model. And then, all of a sudden, boom, steady state model goes out the window, and here comes the Big Bang model. And what do you do with those interpretations? Well, guess what? You will have to reinterpret. You will have to reanalyze. But if you actually look at it, it's not like the Quran was fitting that model completely. We had to force it to fit it with this. This is what I mean about message across time. If the verses don't fit, don't try to make them fit. Don't squeeze them into the model that you think should be the way to go. Because if you squeeze them into that model, then once upon a time your position may expire, and then you're sort of back to square one. But you lose people along the way. You harm faith along the way. So if there is breathing room, and this is really mainly for Group B, if there is breathing room through for interpretation that it sort of makes you go through a sequence of scientific models, don't shove that breathing room on people. If that's if that's a breathing room if there is, don't make the interpretation of Quran the same thing as the Quran. That's basically the message. Next one. Again, message across time, the old, the new. I don't know if this is an actual mosque that exists, or if it's just a conceived one. But,
It's a real one.
it's a real one. It's somewhere.
Yeah.
That's, it looked like enough details to be a real one. So
Yeah.
so message across time, and we're gonna come to real examples how that is displayed in the Quran. I don't know about this lecture, maybe the next, unless we keep going. Next. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about before we dive into it is responsibility. If you are a leader, even if you're a parent in a school, if you are a leader in a community, or if you are responsible for people, you have to realize that when people come with problems, you have to be solution oriented. I try to understand positions. I try to sample some of the lectures from the science community, of course, and I understand what they're trying to do, but also from the religious community, you see about lectures and people come out and everybody wants to have a position on evolution for some reason. Even people have absolutely no knowledge what evolution is talking about, but everyone should have a position on evolution. But what I'm trying is these people talk, you come and there's 1,000 people in front of you and you want to talk about evolution, at least take a minute to think. Are you doing a solution-oriented approach? Is the words coming out of your mouth are epistemically responsible? What does that mean, epistemically responsible? You actually know what you're talking about. And are you actually making solutions? Are you actually someone coming in, even a child comes to you from high school and tell you, I learned today about that once upon a time we and monkeys were cousins. Are you going to take a position that is solution oriented, or are you going to just make a problem worse, or And are you going to take, and this is another example, are you going to take a position that is going to inspire? Okay, you have an idea how you can resolve the issue, but is that solution actually going to stand the test of time? Whatever reconciliation you're going to have, is it good for you and your kids and your grandkids and 100 years from now and 500 years from now, or is it barely enough just for you? That is what position is inspire. Those two are mainly for Group B, for the believers. So make sure whatever position you take is not going to expire with time, and make sure whatever position you take is actually solving problems, not causing more problems or avoiding the problem altogether. And for Group A, and God help us, they're actually a minority too. The people that are antagonists, the people that lack humility, those are actually minority. And I'm going to talk about the concept of popularizing science. Yes, please.
Well, brother, you are very good at English and you are, mashallah, very extempore, but we are born some other country.
Yes, sir.
Please slow down a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I will. No, please, cut me if I'm not making sense. Let me repeat.
Yeah.
Slow down, repeat. Whatever makes this useful. Again, we want it to be useful. It's not about me. It's about you.
Thank you.
If I don't connect the ideas to you, I fail in my responsibility. So please, don't feel any inconvenience.
Digest it also.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Yeah, definitely.
Jazakallah khair.
Definitely.
So for Group A, there are antagonists. They just want to, scientists out there, they just want to make your life miserable. And I'm going to talk in details about those. But also, there are people that have humility, and I've seen a lot of those. Some people are just focused on the applications. They're just focused on whatever project they want to do. They have no agenda about making people's lives. But there's the antagonists. Antagonists are actually on a crusade to convert you to their religion.